All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Amphitheater Studio here at the Corning Museum of Glass. My name is Eric Goldschmidt. I run a lot of the flameworking programs that we do here at the museum, and I have the honor of hosting a really amazing live stream demonstration that is going on here. So this week we have a very special program, what we call the Corning Museum of Glass Flameworking Collab. This is our 4th annual version of this. And this is a program where we invite in a few of the top flame workers in the field to collaborate together, spend the week with us in the amphitheater shop here, and make an amazing piece of glass. So our artist for this iteration here, we are really honored to have David Colton at the far bench, visiting us from West Hampton, Massachusetts. At the middle bench here, we have Andrew AKM Morris. He's visiting us from Richmond, Virginia. And to my left here, we have Darby Holm, who is visiting us from Grants Pass, Oregon. Now, these guys are a few of the sort of highest echelon of flame workers out there in the world. And they have been plugging away on a single object through the course of this week. They arrived in town Sunday night. We got all their equipment set up. They got to work Monday morning, about 10 o'clock, and they have just been cranking along. We've spent at least 10 hours in the studio each day as they've been cranking along here. And they are working on a single collaborative object. And we'll get the sketchbook out here so we can show you the sketch of what they're shooting for. So, well, we'll try that in a minute. So we've got a sketch here, and what they're working on really ties together each of their individual voices as artists and combines it into one amazing piece of sculpture. They are working on a piece that is going to be hung on a wall. It will actually be a shelf that has several different sculptural elements representing each of the artists in there. And a very important aspect of the work these guys specialize in, they are really specialists at making glass pipes for cannabis consumption. That is a huge aspect of the flameworking world nowadays. It's been a very lucrative field over really the last 25 to 30 years, and it has been a field that has allowed thousands of artists to really dive in and make a living on their own terms in their own private studios, and been a great way for a lot of folks to get introduced to glass, and a great way for glass to be applied for an important function. And these guys are at the very top of that field. So part of this piece will also include a functional pipe as well. And the elements of this design really sort of speak to their foundations, where they've come from, the battles they've had with glass, and how glass has sort of influenced their lives, how their work influences glass, and then putting a beautiful water pipe on top of all that to really celebrate the aspects of the pipe and give it its place in these fine art institutions like the Corning Museum of Glass. So we'll get that camera going on the drawing shortly, but the pace of how this will work. Flameworking on this level sort of works at an odd pace. There are some quieter moments as they're all sort of focused on creating the different detailed elements that will go into the composition. And then there are some really intense moments where they're adding these details into that composition. So we'll take a look at the drawing here. First of all, we could look at the cover of this sketchbook. I think is fantastic. There we go. That's pretty awesome stuff. And yeah, we'll pop this open. So here's our sketch. We've got the shelf that mounts to the wall, a whole bunch of detailed panels that Andrew's been working on that go on the front of the shelf. We've got one of Andrew's large skulls with a couple of Darby's peyote buttons in the eyes, a whole bunch of David's frilly, beautiful color work, almost like fireworks sort of coming off of the skull there, and some of Darby's Southwest-themed elements. We've got some scorpions tucked in here, a cactus, and then, of course, a water pipe that brings together all of their inspirations as well, sitting at that prominent spot on top of the shelf. So that's what these guys are working towards. And again, they've put in many, many hours already. Before even arriving here in Corning, Darby spent the last week at Andrew's studio just preparing color, just to bring the color all prepared up here. So by the time this piece is done, there's probably going to be about 200 hours worth of work in it. Traditionally, our demos here at the museum, we tend to start and finish a piece in 15 to 20 minutes, and it gives us a good chance to run through the fundamentals of glassmaking. But to create more elaborate pieces, things that are really at the top level of what's going on in the glass world, it takes many hours, many days, and potentially even weeks. So these guys are preparing some of the smaller parts here that are going to be added into the composition. The beginnings of the composition are in this black oven back here. We're keeping that glass warm. We want to keep that above 1,000 Fahrenheit as they continue to add to it. If the glass gets too cold and then they hit it with one of these really hot torches, it's very likely to crack. So very important that piece stays well up to temperature. And for some reason, we're looking a little cool there. Hey, have you guys been in here recently? I'm not sure why that is. We're looking a little low on temperature there. I wonder if do we want to maybe transfer? It's coming back up, but I'm not sure why it's down there. Yep. So for some reason, this oven's looking a little bit cool. We're going to move the piece and get it in this guy here so it is up to the proper temperature before we start attaching things. All right. It's a good thing we've got multiple ovens. I wonder if we might have blown an element in there. So some of the fundamentals of flameworking. Flameworking is essentially a style of glass blowing where we use focused heat sources rather than big furnaces. So flameworkers tend to work over torches that run on either propane or natural gas and oxygen. These guys are on propane and oxygen here. And as you mix those gases fully, the temperature of the flame will get all the way up around 4,400 Fahrenheit. Get this squeezed in here. I'm glad we have that going. Alrighty, so we'll let that soak for a little bit. Get some good heat soaked back in there. So 4,400 degree flame. Sounds like a pretty uncomfortable working environment, but believe it or not, it's still plenty comfortable working behind these torches. There's so much oxygen pushing its way through the torch, it helps to really focus that heat. So the heat stays pretty well contained within the flame. Where things do get pretty hot and uncomfortable is when you're working larger and larger masses of glass, and that glass will radiate heat back at you. That's where things get a little uncomfortable. There also will be some moments these guys are probably overheating a little bit as they're doing their assembly. They will have a Bunsen burner sort of washing over the piece. There may be a couple of torches coming together to attach things. So once we get the piece really soaked and up to temperature, we'll give it maybe 10 minutes or so in this oven here. They should be able to start assembling some other things into that composition. But in the meantime, we've got David working on his sort of signature forms here. He's got a few different colors layered together here. For those of you who know all the names of the different colored glasses in this market, we've got some Electrum, and there's a little bit of Lucy over the top of that. Electrum is a new colored glass that came out over the last year that it has a very metallic look to it, almost like a brass metallic-y look. And Andrew put another color over the top of that is actually reactive to different levels of UV light. And that's Lucy glass from North Star Glass. So that glass, when we shine a black light on it, once it's at room temperature, will throw off some purples and some pink colors, and with a metallic background, it really pops. So we'll show you some of that once we get a cool section of that to show. So David is setting that up and preparing to make one of his really unique sort of fireworks-inspired forms. We happen to have one of David's masterpieces in our contemporary art and design wing up the stairs here. If you see a big red piece with these sort of swirling forms on it that is mounted on the wall up in the art and design wing, that's David's work there. He's also got a couple of pieces in our retail shop here too. So some cool opportunities to see more of David's work. We've got a few finished pieces from Darby and Andrew on the bench over here. So if you feel like taking a peek at those, you can feel free to do that. Now, Andrew, a lot of his sort of voice in glasswork revolves around skulls and bones. So we showed you the picture, the drawing of the skull that's sort of the part of the centerpiece of the composition. And he's working on a couple of bones here, getting those attached. And those will be attached in with a lot of David's elements as well. And I mentioned there will be a functional water pipe on top of everything there. That's what Darby's working on. So working on one element of that. What part of the pipe is that?
Working on the mouthpiece.
Okay, this will be the mouthpiece to the pipe. So getting that together, he's got a beautifully patterned section on the end that's closest to his mouth there, and attaching that to some beautiful transparent purple glass, some galaxy for those of you scoring at home. So I do want to take a moment. We are really thankful. We have a wonderful sponsor for the collab this year, ABR Imagery, abrimagery.com. They are wonderful suppliers of all the different things we need as flame workers, whether it's tools or raw glass, colored glass. And we are thrilled to have them engaged with us here and really appreciate the support. And yeah, so we'll continue cranking away. It is coming up. I wonder if maybe it was just leaning up for a little bit. It is, slowly. Well, it did a little. I wonder. We might have lost an element in there. Not great timing. Everything's been functioning just fine until now. That doesn't help so much. So we'll have to use our smaller ovens a little more effectively. Now the ovens, though, the ways that we use them, there's really a couple of ways that we use these ovens. As we're working on a project, we use the ovens to do what we call garaging. We keep pieces in there to keep them up to temperature, so when we bring them to the 4,000 degree flame, they're hot and ready to be attached or ready to be worked on. The other way that we use the ovens is at the end of the process. We want to make sure the glass cools slowly and evenly. As glass is heated, it swells. As it cools, it shrinks. So if a piece of glass is heated or cooled too unevenly, different areas expand and contract so differently, they pull apart, they crack. We call that thermal shock. And yep. Why don't you keep cranking that up? All right, there we go. Problem solved. Okay, so keeping an eye on temperature, that is a constant as a glass maker. And you sort of get a stopwatch in the back of your head sometimes as you're working on things and you realize you've had it away from the heat for a little while, and you know your stopwatch goes off. You know you either have to get it back in the flame or get it in the oven to keep it safe. So we're constantly thinking about temperature and timing. Glassworking is a lot like cooking in that respect. It really is largely about temperature and timing. So we'll get everything warmed up. It's good to see that oven cranking up. And this guy's been up to temperature for 5 minutes now, so probably another 5 minutes or so. We'll pull the composition out of the oven and get into attaching more bits to that. So if you do have any questions, again, my name's Eric. Feel free to shout out my name, or if you want to raise your hand up there, happy to answer questions. That goes for all of you joining us on the internet as well. Feel free to type some questions into the chat, and Brady will get those questions to me. So we'll be happy to answer whatever questions pop up. Now, I mentioned the working environment is pretty comfortable. Even with these 4,000 degree flames, it's still plenty comfortable working with them. But I know a lot of folks, if they haven't seen flame working before, they wonder about the way we handle the glass and the fact that we melt the same piece of glass we're holding, and we hold the glass with bare hands as we do this stuff. Well, glass is a really good insulator, but it's a lousy conductor. So it simply does not conduct the heat all the way to where their fingers are. They also really need their dexterity. Notice Darby really using his fingertips to control the glass, and he needs that control. He needs that real fine control. If he was wearing gloves, he wouldn't have that level of control. So very rare to see flame workers wearing gloves, except at moments when we have to really directly handle the hot glass. There will be a few moments of that. We saw a moment just a few minutes ago where Darby was pulling the piece from one oven to the next. So yeah, we'll use some Kevlar gloves when we do need to grab the really hot stuff. But any other time, if we can avoid having the gloves on, we need the dexterity, so we do try to avoid that. So a little bit more about David's process and how his work tends to come together and how it's coming together on this composition here too. He makes these wonderful abstract forms. And his process is sort of to make, of course, think about his color palette, think about some forms that can work together, and then he'll get the colors worked in, create a whole bunch of these different shapes, and then he'll let them cool down. He'll sort of lay them out together, see which ones align best with each other, and try to figure out what that composition needs to be that works best. And he'll start attaching the individual little sections into bigger compositions. And then ultimately, those bigger compositions, they're going to find spots in the big piece to get everything assembled in there. So he tends to make a lot of these different parts, then sort of evaluates things, and then gets them together in the flame and gets everything permanently attached. But it's a process. Working out the color palette, working out a bunch of forms, getting them laid together and worked out from there. So a lot of different things going on here. It looks like Andrew's preparing some rods of clear glass. When they start attaching the different elements into the composition, he's going to want to attach from multiple spots on each element. Just having one connection, that attaches okay, but things could snap off pretty easily with just one connection point. So we want to make sure we have multiples, ideally 3 or more different connection points for each element to really hold them together. And a lot of folks just think of glass for its fragility, but it actually can be extremely strong when it's put together well too. So these guys are making sure structure is a very important element in this. So Darby's created the mouthpiece. He sort of gathered some glass together, made it a little extra thick, made a nice disc out of that. So one other crucial element to the level of work these guys do and the sort of work they make, it functions incredibly well. And having a mouthpiece of just the right shape so it's comfortable for the collector and the user, very important. So no detail goes unfinished or without great attention. So just getting that worked out and sort of popping a hole on the top there. And I suspect he's probably going to attach another tube onto that end because he's going to need another clear tube as a handle to then attach this mouthpiece to the rest of the form. So he's just setting up that hole for that attachment. And again, Andrew just getting the clear glass size just the way he wants for his attachments, being prepared for these intense moments when they start really doing this assembly. That's crucial stuff. So he's sort of setting up a ball on the end of the rod there. He knows that's just the right amount of glass for certain attachments. So getting it all set up here. So we're just about ready for a little more excitement. We'll just give it a few more minutes for that piece to really soak through. And we want to make sure the whole piece is warmed up to at least 1060 Fahrenheit. And then as we start to prepare to really make what we call the move here, you notice Andrew's clearing off. This is a sheet of graphite here. We're going to warm up the graphite. We don't want to place the hot glass on a cold surface, so the graphite will hold the heat pretty well. Andrew will take one of his hand torches and warm that up. That's how we know that we're about to get into one of these intense moments. So clearing space. And as they work on assembling, generally Andrew is getting in there with a hand torch to start the assembling. Darby might even reach for a torch, so the two of them are heating different spots at different times. As they have the piece out of the oven for a few minutes, very likely the Darby will grab a Bunsen burner that's sitting on top of the bench. That burns at around maybe 1500 Fahrenheit, so it gives a more gentle heat to everything. So he'll start to wash that over the surface of the rest of the sculpture, just trying to keep it all above 1000 degrees. And now a little discussion about how this is going to go, making sure everybody's all prepared and informed, and getting ready to make this move. These are the really risky elements of working on a piece. Again, there's already dozens of hours into what they've done, and just a few moments of losing focus can damage dozens of hours of work or completely destroy it. So making sure they know exactly where the torches are, they know exactly what each move is going to be. Getting all set up here, and David's got his hands free too, so he can jump in here. This is the calm before the storm here, just getting organized. All right, so yeah. These are the moments when we do put on gloves, when we don't have to really turn the glass, or we're not sculpting it and don't have to have quite the same level of precision, but we need to grab some stuff that's really hot. We put on some Kevlar gloves. All right, so firing up that monster of a hand torch over there. We want to get that graphite nice and warm. All right, everybody take their spots. Get out of the way. So these are the adrenaline rush moments for flameworkers. So a lot of this process is sort of slow and tedious, and then there are the really adrenaline pumping moments. I know that's one of my favorite parts of glassmaking, is when a lot's on the line and you have to just really lock in that focus and make sure everything's right. So here we go. We get a couple of the elements that are going to be attached out of the oven. Darby's got the composition coming out here. So the black elements on this are sort of the framework for the shelf, and also the framework for the back of the shelf that'll be attached to a wall. And we've got the skull right in the middle there. That's a great shot on those cameras. Thanks, guys. All right, so now identifying exactly where they want to put these new sections and get those added in. Making sure everybody's on the same page here. David's got the tongs ready so he can keep the piece from sliding around as Andrew starts to make an attachment here. So everybody's sort of scoping it out, making sure that is the spot where they want to land this. Darby's starting to warm up where this section will be attached to. And when they make an attachment like this, they have two major concerns. The first is temperature. We want to make sure both pieces that are being attached are hot enough that they're really going to flow together and make a permanent attachment as they come together. They're judging temperature by watching the glow of the glass. They almost want that glass white hot as it's attaching. At that point, it's pretty close to 3000 Fahrenheit. At that temperature, it's almost as soft as honey. The glass will flow together and make a real stable attachment. So temperature's the first key. The second is the shapes at which things come together and the angles. They don't want to create sharp, acute angles. This glass, if you create a sharp, acute angle, will snap apart as it cools. So, the first attachment, they're making sure the temperatures are really right. And now he's sort of reaching in here, adding another attachment, so it'll be supported from 2 different spots. Then he'll go back to the first connection, work that in a little bit more. Make sure it's really flowed together properly, make sure there aren't any of those awkward angles in there. And by supporting it with a second attachment, that piece is holding in place. And he can sort of work one attachment, get that all cleaned up. He'll go back to the second attachment, get that cleaned up. And just sort of go back and forth, make sure it's attached in at least 2 spots. Ideally, we'll have it attached maybe in a 3rd or a 4th spot. And the more interconnected this is, the more structural integrity we've got. So now Andrew and Darby can both dive in, heat some different spots at the same time. The different sizes of hand torches will fit into these tight spots. And these little mini hand torches, you see this big object, and you might not realize quite how important a little tiny torch is in creating an object like this. These sort of mini hand torches started getting really popular. You started to see them in just about everybody's studios, maybe about 10 years ago, 15 years ago or so. And learning to use these little tiny torches, in my opinion, has really elevated where flameworking has gone. People have started to make much more elaborate compositions because they can get the right heat in there. And having the torch in your hand when you're working around something this elaborate, absolutely crucial. So they're trying to get the flame right in there. They don't want to melt or distort any other elements as they're working on that. So having the very precise heat is crucial. We have a question from the web. Excellent question. Is making a usable or functional object more difficult or easier than making an object that is simply decorative? I would venture to say it's quite a bit harder because you have to include the function. And a lot of what these guys do for the function of these pieces, there's very specific flow to water through them. So they've got very precise shapes and angles at which things come together so the water flows properly, and also so the smoke or the vapors flow properly as well. And also incorporating that into the artistry. Very complex work. There's a lot that has to come together. And it's not that easy to be both artistic and really technically proficient to make the real precision sort of elements that need to come together for the level of function that these guys create. So yeah, in my opinion, I would say creating the decorative object with the function, incredibly difficult to do. These guys, of course, make it look pretty simple, but it certainly is not. Yeah, these guys, all of them are creeping up pretty close to 30 years experience on the torch. And again, we've got some of the leaders in the field here. These guys have been at the top of this game for a long time now. So getting these attachments finished up. And at this point, we've been out of the kiln for about 6 minutes or so. This is the point where we start getting a bit concerned. So we're reaching in there. Andrew's got the Bunsen reaching in there. That's sort of washing some gentle heat along everything. Gives Darby a little extra time to sort of poke around and make sure those attachments are nice and clean. And this is just one of the moments where you really want to trust your collaborators. You got this Bunsen flame washing around the piece. Darby, even though it's a little tiny torch, that's still 3,500 degrees right there. I'm sure Andrew would rather not get hit by that flame. So yeah, you got to trust your collaborators. So just getting that all sealed in there. You really want to make sure all these attachments are nice and clean and truly finished. They don't want to have to look back at these later in the process and have to make any repairs. As they're continuing to build this piece, they're going to be covering up more of where the connection points are. It's going to get more and more difficult to get flames into those spots that they're working on right now. So they want to make sure everything's perfect before it goes back in the oven here. Love these camera views. You guys are doing such a nice job in there. All right. David, what do you think? They doing okay? Feeling comfortable? Good. Excellent. All right, so just doing a quick check. This will be the next element that gets attached on there. So before the composition goes back in the oven, just checking where it's going to be aligned, making sure the connection points they've attached to David's elements are in the right spots for where they want to connect to the framework here. So just sort of working out the next step of the design. People often ask if we know exactly what we're going to make before we start melting glass as glass workers. And yes, we always have a good fundamental plan before we start. Otherwise, you just end up wasting a lot of fuel and gas. But there is a lot of improvisation that can happen in that process as you move towards that end. All right. Well, there we go. We'll get that safely back into the oven here. Get it all sealed back up. And it'll be a little more comfortable as this oven gets up to full temperature again. They'll have a little more room, but there we go. Nice move, gentlemen. Nicely done. Excellent. All right, everybody can exhale a little bit, relax a little bit for a moment. And yeah, so we'll let that oven come back up to temperature. Of course, when you open the door, the temperature drops for a bit, so it'll take a few minutes to get back up to 1060 again. And then we'll generally let it soak at 1060 for about 10 minutes. Then they can dive in on another move. So in the meantime, they have many other elements to continue working on here. So Andrew's sort of thinking through, they've determined that these other couple of elements here have some very specific spots. So figuring out the timing of when those are going to get attached to the bigger composition there. And in the meantime, Darby's going to dive back in, continue working on the pipe element that's going to sit on top of the shelf. So sort of eyeing things out there. And I imagine David's going to dive back in. We want more of those abstract forms. They really want to fill in the beautiful sort of fireworks effects that David has going with his beautiful elements there. So continuing to build the composition. Cool. Yeah, if that piece that he just pulled out has a chance to cool a little bit, I want to show you some of the color work that's going on in there. So I'll let these guys continue to work out the plan here. Do we have a question out there? Yes, we do. Does this piece have a name yet? I don't think it does, but let me check in. You guys don't have a title for this, do you? No, not yet. You'll think of something? That's perfect. Oh, you'll pay attention. All right, fair enough. Yeah, no name yet. I think they probably want to get through the construction of it, and then maybe they can think of some titles. As long as it's not. Uh-oh, yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. I think we should be okay. All right, so planning out the next few moves. And we'll get David diving back in, making some of his beautiful forms again. So crucial that every step is sort of mapped out here. Eyeing some of the different colors that might get incorporated. So these guys, again, there's going to be about 200 hours worth of work that winds up in here. And it's sort of an unpredictable timeline. We have a general idea about how long it's going to take because they are headed home on Saturday, so they need to finish up Friday. But with a complex piece like this, there are sort of an uneven balance of how the work gets produced. So yeah, we'll probably be here into the evening tonight, and I would imagine we'll be here pretty late tomorrow as well. And whatever it takes for these guys to finish this, this top-notch work here, we're happy to have them in the studio. So it looks like Andrew has a piece of some rainbow patterned tubing over here. I'm guessing that's going to wind up as part of the functional elements here. And bringing that up to temperature in the Bunsen burner. The Bunsen is a really nice addition to a flameworking studio. Just gives you an extra layer of sort of protective heat as you're working through complex pieces. The Bunsen is, the very top of it is probably around 1200 Fahrenheit. As you reach a little deeper down towards where the flames are coming out from, it gets a little bit hotter, maybe up around 1500. So in our world, that's a gentle heat. That's a way to ease heat into the glass before we put it into the 4000 degree flame, or to keep it to temperature as we're working just one area of that as well. So the Bunsen is definitely a nice addition. I added one to my studio a few years ago, and it saves me a lot of time and a lot of breakage as well. All right, so we'll let these guys sort of settle back in here. Now, I know a lot of folks are curious how we sort of develop the Collab program. How do we figure out what artists are coming in here? Well, I do my best as a liaison between the museum and the flameworking community to sort of keep an eye out and see who really is at the leading edge of what's going on in flameworking, and particularly for the Collab program, I keep an eye out for folks who have a good portfolio of collaborative work. And in the case with these guys, Andrew, I've been seeing his collaborative work for 20 years now, and he has just a great feel for working with other artists. And so I reached out to Andrew about a year ago, asked him if he'd like to dive in on this opportunity, and if so, think about what he wants to make and who he would want to come in to work with him. Took him a few weeks to sort of process what he might want to make, and got a call back. Okay, I know what I want to make, and I'm going to reach out to these guys. And then we got another call, like, yeah, Darby's on board, Colton's on board, we're good to go. And I was quite thrilled to hear that. I have a huge amount of respect for Andrew's work, as does the whole flameworking field. He really has been a leader in developing new techniques, new sort of color work ideas. He is a brilliant sculptor. And David and I met in a class when we were both without all the gray hairs, probably, what was that, 20 plus years ago. And David has been plugging away, been one of the leaders in the flameworking community for a long time as well. And Darby, I actually just got to meet when he came here. Well, we met online in a couple of conversations. But as I've worked with a whole lot of flameworkers who are really on the top of the game, everybody says you got to get Darby in here. So many people have learned things from Darby, whether it's innovative techniques or color ideas, or even just how to be a good shopmate. You get props from everybody in the industry, Darby. You really do. So one of the real. Did we decide you were the godfather or the grandfather the other night? Grandfather. So we've sort of determined that Darby is really the grandfather of the American contemporary pipe movement here. And he has played a role in mentoring all sorts of folks who are at the top of the game. He's developed all sorts of different techniques that we all count on, and is just a really wonderful, humble leader of this movement. So really psyched to have him here, and it's been a nice chance to get Darby introduced to Corning, which is great. So, yeah, good stuff. Now, Andrew, he's been through Corning several times through the years. In addition to the flameworking that he does, he also is an accomplished furnace worker. And when he first started working in glass, he was first introduced to glass working out of furnaces. When he was at high school times, his mother actually gifted his father a class in glass blowing. And when Andrew saw what Dad was able to make in a class, thought that was pretty amazing. And hey, can I give that a shot? And next thing we know, he took a class, and the person he was working with in that class realized how inspired he was as a young guy and intrigued by the material. So he got a call back like, hey, I'm going to be making some work. Will you come in and assist me? So he got pulled in to help and assist as well. And then from there, as he started to realize, yeah, glass is going to be my thing, he also found out that he could study glass in college. So Andrew went to Virginia Commonwealth University, studied glass there, and in his experience there was taught by somebody else who has really influenced a lot of us contemporary flame workers, Emilio Santini, who is a Venetian-born, now American emigrated citizen here, who he's from a family of glassmakers that goes back a few hundred years and has taught many of us in the U.S. some flameworking. So Andrew first got introduced to flameworking through Emilio in college and realized that this is the avenue I want to go down. He noticed the pipe market was starting to open up quite a bit, saw room for a career in that scene, and has really taken to it and taken off with it. So psyched to have these guys here. David has taken a few classes here through the years as well. It was great to have him here in 2019. He was the recipient of a major commission that we do, the Raycow Commission, where we invite an artist who we have not yet collected a piece from to produce something that really sort of brings them to a new phase in their career. So David was the Raycow Commission artist in 2019, and the piece that we have from him is up on view right now in the Contemporary Art and Design Wing, which is up behind you all. It is the first contemporary cannabis pipe to be collected by a major museum. So a huge landmark in our collections, and a real wonderful honor for David as well. All right, so Darby is continuing to work on the pipe here, the functional elements. And he has, there's an example of the form that he's going for that's down on the bench in front of the stage here that has sort of a peyote button on top of the rest of the water piece. So that's what's going on here, using some different coloring, but the same sort of forms to bring together here. All right, let's see if this thing is cool yet. Yeah, it might be close enough. So some of the pattern work these guys are putting into the pieces here, just absolutely out of this world. I mentioned they were using a newer color on the market called Electrum that has a real metallic-y look to it, and then also putting some colored glass over the top of it that reacts to different ranges of UV light. So let's see if we can find yep. So we'll get a camera going here that we can show you the color work here. Oh, yeah. Okay, so we've got the Electrum there. Almost looks like hammered metal, like hammered bronze. And then we can add some bonus features. So when we shine the black light on there, see all that sort of purpley pink, and then boom, there it goes. So some pretty cool added effects in this glass. And yeah, fun to have all these new colors. I've mentioned how the pipe making movement has been a very broad thing and really encompassed a lot of folks getting into glass making. And because there have been so many people getting into this field, it has opened up the market for people who make tools for us and also people who make colored glass for this market. So there are new companies that are developing, creating colored glass for us artists to use, and also the companies that already existed before this pipe movement really took off. They, because they're making enough money and there's enough of a field out there, they're able to really experiment, and they're really advancing the colors that are available. So really expanding the palette. And again, I give a lot of credit to the advancement of this pipe community, really opening up new options for all flame workers. So it's got quite an influence over what we all do in glassworking. Now, I haven't really talked about the composition of the glass these guys are working with. A lot of folks probably don't realize it, but there are many different recipes for glass. There are tens of thousands of different recipes for glass. As you change the ingredients in a glass recipe, you can wind up with some very different characteristics to the glass. And the glass these guys are using here, it's what's known as borosilicate. Now, the most common glass on the planet is what we call soda lime glass. And that is what these windows here are made from. That's what we keep in our furnaces here. So the different vases and bowls on the front of the stage, those are soda lime glass. The main ingredients for soda lime glass, the prime ingredient is sand, very pure silica content sand. That comes from sandstone mines where we know the silica content is as pure as possible. If you add to that, you've got about 75% sand, you've got about 15% soda ash or sodium carbonate, also mined out of the ground. Add another 10% limestone or calcium carbonate, also mined out of the ground. Get those three ingredients together, heat them up to about 2400 Fahrenheit. You will have colorless glass like these windows on the front of the stage here. If you remove some of that soda ash and add in some boric oxide or boron oxide, you will get what's known as a borosilicate glass. I talked about how glass expands with heat and contracts with cooling. When you add boric oxide to it, it doesn't expand and contract so much. And the big advantage there, the less it expands and contracts, the less likely it is to crack due to temperature change. So it resists what we call thermal shock much better. If you're making something that is going to have heat applied to it, pretty crucial thing to have a glass that can tolerate that. So for the pipes that these guys make, borosilicate is a crucial material. And borosilicate was originally developed for science. It was originally developed as a material for lenses back in the 1880s and 1890s. As scientists were getting a little more involved in the use of lenses for microscopes and telescopes, if you had a glass that would expand and contract too much with temperature change, that would change the optics of the lens. So there was an effort put in by a few German scientists to figure out a glass that wouldn't expand and contract so much and would be much more consistent for lenses. So Otto Schott, a German scientist, is credited with coming up with borosilicate as we know it today. And borosilicate has been a very important glass for Corning as well. Corning Glassworks, now Corning Incorporated, as they started to see this new formulation develop, they realized there were other applications for this. One key application that they developed borosilicate for is for railroad lanterns back in the early 1900s. So railroad lanterns in that time period, the light was produced oftentimes by a gas lamp. Well, if you have a gas lamp and you've got soda lime glass and all of a sudden it starts to rain or snow, you've got water hitting that hot glass, it shocks, it cracks, and that signal lantern goes out. So you've got danger on the railways there. So Corning started to work with borosilicate and develop glass that would tolerate that condition. So their first efforts into borosilicate were making the cover glass for signal lanterns for the railroad. They very quickly realized that this glass also would be crucial for laboratory efforts, so Corning started to develop factory processes to produce mass amounts of tubing and rods for scientific glassblowers to use to create apparatus. So that is really the biggest industrial use for flameworking is people who specialize in making scientific apparatus for laboratory work. And that plays a big role in the sort of work that these guys do as well. So a lot of these complex assemblies for the function of these water pipes really relies on a lot of techniques that have been developed in the scientific glassblowing world. All right. Nice. So we've got our electrum peyote bud on top of what will be the can to the rig that's going to go on top of the shelf. Looking good there. So Darby's going to get that back in the oven, get it nice and safe here. And it looks like the composition's been up to temp for about 14 minutes here, so they're probably ready for the next big move. So these have been the more relaxed moments, working on some of the smaller details. And yeah, I think we're getting everybody settled here and ready to make the next move on the composition. So it kind of feels like the quiet before the storm here. Everybody's sort of settling down. So next step, we're going to want to get the graphite plate nice and warm. I'm sure these guys will start to glove up and get their Kevlar gloves ready, get those hand torches in position. And it's time for those the more exhilarating moments for us glass makers when that composition is out of the oven and at risk. All right. So again, if there are any questions up, perfect. What's the longest you could keep the piece out of the oven for if you have supplemental torches? A long time. I mean, if they, Andrew actually has sort of a graphite platform with a bunch of holes on it that we could set on the table, put Bunsen burners underneath it. We could probably keep it out of the oven for a long time, as long as those Bunsens are on it the whole time. That would be pretty similar to using the oven and keeping it around 1200 Fahrenheit or so. So yeah, we could keep it out for quite a while. Now, one other catch, another question along those same lines that we often get here. People wonder if we can continually remelt the same glass. Can we just keep melting, keep shaping? Theoretically, we can continue melting the same glass, but as you do that, you're burning out some of the ingredients. So you're actually changing the composition over time as you continually reheat. And what eventually can start to happen to glass that has been overworked, if it's clear glass, sometimes it starts to opacify a little bit. You'll notice the glass gets stiffer to work with, even at the same temperatures. It's stiffer because you burnt out some of the fluxes that keep it softer. And it also tends to get more brittle when it's in a room temperature state. So the glass does change. There is a limit to that. When we recycle glass, like industrial recycling, they don't just remelt the same glass. They also add some fresh raw materials to that to freshen that glass up. All right, looks like we're ready for the move here. I'll get the oven open. Darby gets to squeeze in there and get the composition out. All right, off we go here. So we'll get the piece settled on the graphite here, hand off the next element that's getting attached. Andrew is just wiping off the piece that's about to be attached. The insulative bricks inside of the ovens, they're really soft, and they do tend to leave a little bit of dust from the kiln on the glass. So it's important to wipe that off. It can actually cook into the glass a little bit. So now preparing the heat to make this attachment here. I heard the term price check, which means that Andrew just wants to check exactly where this is going to go and make sure everybody's in agreement that that is the spot, that's where it's going to land. Once they stick this piece to the rest of the composition, they could potentially remove it, but you don't want to have to get into that situation. There we go. So landing it right there. Looks like they had good heat. It really sort of flowed together. Andrew just getting it positioned just right. He's sort of lifting up a little bit also. Oftentimes as we make attachments like this, we'll sort of push together and then pull apart a little bit. I talked earlier about how we don't want to create acute angles as we make attachments, so doing that little bit of a pull away will also help the glass to sort of curve rather than crunching together. And now Darby just getting right in there, getting all that glass to flow together to get a nice clean attachment. And as that attachment sort of settles, they'll want to find another spot to interconnect things. And glass, if properly attached and interconnected the way they're putting this together, can really be incredibly strong. And these guys, and this is a pretty epic piece here. They want to make sure every attachment is just right. We want this to be a nice stable piece for hundreds of years, so making sure it gets assembled well. So looks like we're getting a bit of a bridge here. They're sort of attaching one of the sort of the end of one of the sculptural elements to the end of another one here, and keeping a rather thick rod connecting the two. They want those pieces to hold each other in place, and then they'll be able to dive in a little closer to the initial attachment here. So we call that bridging. We'll often use bits of clear glass to hold the sculptural elements in place, make sure we get the attachments just right, and then we'll remove that extra clear glass later. So bridging that together. Otherwise, as you're attaching one element, other things might start moving. So this just braces everything in place. And again, they'll remove that rod of clear glass later on in the process. And oftentimes that's a lot of what consumes the effort on the last sort of few hours of a piece like this, is often removing the last of the bridges that have been put on there for structure, getting everything cleaned up. So we'll deal with that when that time comes tomorrow. And again, we see Andrew sort of washing over the piece with the Bunsen, just keeping that gentle heat on there. Yeah, so if you had a few Bunsens and had the piece at just the right distance from the Bunsens, they could keep that warm out of the oven for quite a while. But there are risks there. Yeah, one of the sketchy things with a Bunsen is a breeze will definitely push that around, so you don't want to have to count on that. Nice to have the added heat, but yeah, I don't think I would want to count on that when I've got dozens of hours involved in a piece. All right, so I think I hear some discussion of where the next couple of bits are going to go in here. So do another price check of the next couple of elements that are going to get attached on here, and just sort of eyeing that out. Make sure everybody's in agreement. Since the piece is out, they'll sort of scope out what the next couple of moves are going to be, trying to work as efficiently as possible. There are times when they might bring the composition out, just check alignment of the next few things they're going to do, but it's maybe takes a few minutes more than they want it to take just to check out alignment, so they won't actually attach anything then. They'll put the piece back in the oven, let it warm back up, and then make the attachment after that. Looks like Darby had just gotten a little bit of glass stuck to the face of the torch there. That's why he was knocking that off of there. That happens sometimes when you're getting really close to the action. All right. We see Darby throwing the big gloves back on. That tells us that piece is going back in the oven. They've done the price checks. The attachment of what they've just added is all worked in and good to go. So they have a couple of pieces that are very similar shapes that David created. All right, now we can go back into the big oven where they've got a lot more room to play and to reach in there. Excellent. All right, another successful move there. We like that. Nicely done. I think you guys are starting to get the feel for how this stuff works. It's sort of these slow, tedious moments, and then the moments when the piece is out of the oven and it gets pretty intense. And then we can take a breath for a few more minutes. And moving some of the parts around here, getting the rig parts, the pipe parts into the oven. Moving them over a little closer to Darby's station and try to get some of the other parts of the pipe itself away from the rest of the composition, so there's a little more room to work with in there. All right. So Andrew and David have been talking about exactly where they want to attach these next few elements. And to make the attachments, they're adding little bits of clear glass to the sculptural bits. And that way, when they make the attachment, all they need to get molten is just that little bit of clear, and then they don't distort the rest of the sculptural element as they make the attachment. So just adding little attachment points, little nubs. So that's what these guys are talking about here. How exactly is that going to be connected? What part of the curve is going to be attached? So where should I put that little bit of clear glass for the attachment point? So just getting that all worked out. And you'll notice the colored glass that David has there, it's actually a green. It's sort of a chartreuse green that we see on some of these pieces here. But notice when it's warm, it looks sort of a dull orange, not a bright glowing orange like it's molten, but just sort of a dull orange. Well, different colored glasses at different temperatures have a different color to them oftentimes. Most colored glasses, when you've got them really warm, over 1,000 degrees, they look a little different than they will when they're cold. And as you work with different colored glasses through the course of your career, you learn to recognize what the different colors look like at different temperatures. So these guys, even though a piece may look orange and brown, they know that when it cools, it's going to be yellow and red. So you sort of learn to read the glass that way. Looks like these guys have their ideas worked out. They know where this connection point is going to go and what the next couple of additions are going to be. Notice now we want to get the gloves off because they need to work on a little more fine detail work. So I want to give another shout out. We're really psyched to have some wonderful sponsorship for our CMoG Flame collab this year from ABR Imagery, Ross and the gang back in Bloomington, Indiana at ABR. We really appreciate the support. Thank you very much for making this possible here. ABR, they supply all sorts of the different tools and equipment and colored glasses and clear glasses that we all need in the flameworking industry, and we appreciate that support. So David has attached a bridge here as well. He's got a solid rod of clear glass sort of just tacked onto the tips of those points there. He wants to hold that glass in place as he gets it really hot to add this extra big connection point of clear on there. If he doesn't bridge those pieces together, they might start moving around as he's trying to add that bit of clear. So always a smart move to use the bridge, keep everything where it's supposed to be. What part is this? Aha, this is going to be the joint for the functional piece. So this is what will connect to the piece that will hold the consumables. Very important. Crucial that that fits perfectly. It's got to be sized just right. so things will function properly. Not something that will be an oversight by folks with this level of experience and skill here. And Andrew's actually joining a couple differently patterned sections of tubing there to create even more pattern, what we call in CMoG. So attaching two different bubbles together to create additional pattern. That's a decorative technique that was really popular with Italian glass makers back in the 1950s and 60s. Still a very important decorative technique for them, and also for many of us in the glass game. The pipe makers have really taken to the technique. It allows us to really build up bigger and bigger forms that have decorative pattern to them. So making the patterns in smaller sections and then building them into more elaborate patterns. German glass makers would tend to refer to that technique as montage. They also sort of developed that more for flameworked pieces back in the 1950s and 60s. All right, so Darby's making sure to keep the top of this soaked with that Bunsen heat, getting the hand torch ready. I'm guessing we're going to maybe pop a hole here somewhere. Oh, a little polish. Okay, he's reaching right into the attachment there, just making sure that's all nice and clean. Where that peyote button meets the top of the can of the rig here. Just getting in there, making sure everything's nice and clean. So the section Darby's working on here, it's a perfect example of what I was talking about the colors looking different at different temperatures. This essentially has a rainbow pattern in those striped sections, but yeah, it's really hard to see the yellow. The yellow looks sort of orangey, the red looks brownish, the orange looks sort of a different shade of orange or even brownish. So now Darby's starting to carve in with a butter knife here to create the real sort of texture of the form of the peyote button in there. A lot of Darby's work over the last few years has revolved around these sort of these Southwest desert fever dream sort of concepts here. Darby, one of the most sought-after collaborators in the flameworking game. Nice to have you here. So Darby's background, a little different than Andrew's. I mentioned Andrew studied glass in college after getting exposed to it when he was still in high school, and then realizing, oh, he could dive even deeper in college. Well, Darby first got introduced to glassmaking by his brother Karsten, and Karsten sort of taught him the fundamentals. They did a lot of experimentation and exploration themselves to really learn the ropes of the material and develop new techniques and new ideas in glass, and really have been a couple of the leaders as this glass pipe movement has sort of bloomed out. So I've been a crucial player in the growth of this industry and the inspiration behind the industry. David, he first learned to work with glass when he was living out in Colorado. He and some buddies realized that glass pipes were a thing, and they really wanted to figure out how to make them. And living in Colorado, he was living close by one of the earlier supply companies in the flameworking industry. So they tracked down this supply company and was able to purchase a starter kit, so a torch and some of the basic hand tools. And he and his buddies taught themselves a whole lot about flameworking. And I know from having been in classes with him in the past that he also has taken a number of classes here at our studio in Corning, and also an awful lot of experimentation on his own. Yeah, there's a lot of different ways that people learn to work with glass. All sorts of different ways we get inspired. The most common way that most folks are learning glassworking nowadays is in college. There are almost 50 schools across the U.S. that have glass as part of their fine arts programs or their craft programs. So you could get a bachelor's of fine arts or a master's of fine arts with a focus in glass. That's the route that Andrew went. But also there are a number of other ways to learn this craft. Whole bunch. Nowadays, there's all sorts of amazing info on the internet, lots of YouTube videos out there, some better than others, of course, YouTube being YouTube. But yeah, there's a lot of ways to find information in glassmaking nowadays that did not used to be the case 20, 25 years ago. It used to be very tough to find information on glassworking. As we talk with some of our mentors that are the generation prior to us, you hear a lot of stories of, yeah, I used to go to the fair or to the mall, and I'd see this guy making glass, and as soon as he figured out that I was trying to watch and learn, they'd shut the torch off, cover everything up, and walk away. So there used to be quite a bit of secrecy in glass making. There still are plenty of folks who feel the need to try to hold on to their secrets nowadays. But there is so much free flow of information out there nowadays as well that if you wanna find out how to work with glass, there are plenty of avenues to do that nowadays. If you're lucky enough, maybe you could catch a class with one of these guys. So Andrew making sure the joint here is sized just right. So he's got some graphite tools that allow him to really size things up perfectly. So what is that, 14 millimeter? 10 millimeter. Okay, so going for 10 millimeters exactly on the way this tapers down, because there will be another piece that the collector and the user of this functional piece is going to slide into that, and it's got to fit just right. Yes, sir. The question, do we have any idea what this piece will cost when it's finished? I don't really want to speculate. A lot of us in the glass scene consider it a little bit of a jinx to try to put a price on something that isn't finished yet. What I can tell you is that works from these guys oftentimes goes in the tens of thousands of dollars many times for their works. I would be surprised if a piece like this went for less than their typical work. I would imagine it likely would maybe go for more, since it's the three of them collaborating here. But yeah, we often don't like to talk about pricing until a piece is really finished and we know it's all good. Yeah. Ah, interesting. So we have some thoughts on an avenue for naming. As one of our audience members here mentioned, as she sees the skull, she sort of thinks of Hunter S. Thompson, Fear and Loathing, maybe something along those lines. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see where the inspiration goes. Not every piece gets a title, but we'll see. Have you titled many of your pieces through the years, Andrew? Very few. Yeah. It's an AKM piece. That's all we need to know, right? Yeah, that's an option too. Yeah, that's. Yeah. Andrew is sort of pointing out a title should sort of instruct the audience as to what that object is, what it means, and I think oftentimes in this pipe industry, the collectors might come up with names for the pieces. One of the really cool things about this pipe scene is not only are these beautiful art objects that are collected, they're also used. And people form relationships with these objects. Not only does it just wind up on a wall and you look at it every once in a while, but you really engage with it. And a lot of makers try to create certain forms and textures, so you're engaging with different senses as you're holding the piece and using it. Hopefully you're using it and sharing it, so you're sort of building relationships with others through the piece as well. So oftentimes these works, and it happens with all sorts of artworks, but also oftentimes they take on a life of their own once they get into the collector's hands. And oftentimes we as artists don't have much of a say in that. And there are lots of times that other folks interpret the work differently than we even intended. So yeah, I could see that making sense, that a lot of folks might name the piece themselves once they've collected it, and they've sort of made that connection. That makes a lot of sense. So getting this all sized up just right. Now, one other thing to notice about how Andrew's working, every once in a while you notice the size of the flame changes, and you might hear a little click. He's got foot pedals under his bench here that allow him to control the flame. So that way he's got his hands free. He doesn't have to set the glass down or hold it in some weird way to adjust the knobs. So very helpful to have the foot pedals here. Now all this smoke that you see and some additional flames every once in a while, he's got a little bit of beeswax on that tool there. We use beeswax as lubrication. If the tool gets too hot, it might stick to the molten glass. So beeswax just keeps that tool from sticking and produces some nice dramatic effects of extra flames and smoke. And that's what allows him to size this just right. There's another piece of quartz, a different type of glass that will actually have to fit just right, nice and snug into that for this to function properly. So that sizing is crucial. All right, and there's the piece that needs to fit. This would be the banger. So really wants to make sure this fits very precisely. If it doesn't, then air flows through too much, and you don't get the proper suction as you're using the consumables there. So it is crucial that fit is just right, not something to be rushed. So just making sure that fits nice and snug in there. Darby adding some more decoration to the peyote button here. He's got some white colored glass he's adding on the top here. Lots of different colored glasses getting incorporated here. These guys are all really brilliant colorists. In addition to being good sculptors and just very, very generally skilled glass workers, they're really good at tying together colors that play well together. Looks like Darby has also already created a hole coming off of that peyote button. That's where the mouthpiece will get attached eventually. A quick little size check to see how the mouthpiece and the rest of the can relate. Works for you? All right, perfect. Darby gave it the nod. Sounds good. Question, yes. Do they typically listen to music as they're working? Do you typically listen to music as you're working? Yes. Darby listens to a variety of music. Keeps him from getting bored. That works. Yeah, it's interesting. Glassmaking's a really rhythmic thing. You see the rhythm of the turning that these guys are doing, and there's sort of rhythm to the attachments and things. So yeah, it's nice to have the right music that sort of sets the environment for you, keeps you in rhythm with the work you're making. And we spend a lot of tedious hours in the studio, so it's nice to have the right sounds around you, whether it's music or a podcast. I know a few folks that turn on TVs when they're working. I can't quite relate to that, but whatever works for you. You have a question? Are you putting a sculpture inside of the can? Like, yeah, so there will be some sculptural elements added inside of the can. Ultimately, there'll be a piece that sort of goes down within the can that will help to draw water to where it needs to go and vapors to where they need to go. And they're going to attach a couple of sculptural elements to that piece that goes inside. You may have noticed the can has some opaque sections, and then there's that transparent purple in the middle. That transparent section will give a nice window to the sculptural elements inside. So I know Andrew, yeah, he's got a couple of bits here. We've got a smaller skull, and we've got a couple of bones there that are going to get attached to that down stem. Yeah, these guys don't miss many opportunities for adding crucial details into a piece. So we've got elements on the inside of it. We've got a whole bunch of elements on the outside of it. And we've got this beautiful idea of creating a functional wall-mounted object that is still beautifully decorative and is going to present the water piece on this really beautiful, elegant platform, a real homage to what these guys do and how amazing the pipe making has been for them, and the fact that they've put so much work into this and gotten the pipe game to such a level that we are now here at the Corning Museum of Glass and celebrating this sort of work. So a lot of good intent into the concept behind this piece, really sort of celebrating and reflecting on where they've come from, the work they've put in through the years to get here, and then the elevation of the pipe making finally to get its proper due in the glass world. Trying to peek in here too, Darby. Should bonk that off of there. No. Yeah, those are probably better. Cool. So Darby wants to prepare another section of tubing he's going to use as a handle. He wants to attach that to the mouthpiece, so then he can hold the mouthpiece from the end that does not get attached to the can. So he'll have the handles in the right spots to make that next attachment. And in the meantime, David has another beautiful bit of color here, sort of stretching out the ribbon. A lot of really precise heat control to get these gorgeous forms that he works with. And if you don't work with glass, it might be hard to understand the complexity of shaping a flat ribbon of glass into these beautiful curves here. When the glass is round and cylindrical, it will wiggle any which way very easily. But when it's flat like that, it takes a lot of precision of heating the faces of those flat sections and a lot of precision in the bending to get the heat just right in the right spots. It wants to really wrinkle as you're making bends, especially when it's a flat cane like that. So the precise heating and sort of keeping things hot as he's making these really beautiful curves, it's a lot of precision involved in that. And David has been developing these forms for 20 years or so now, so he's really got an amazing feel for it. And I know that's a big reason why Andrew was psyched to get him on the team here. He's been admiring the forms that David has been making for years now, has had his eyes on how to incorporate some of David's beautiful decorative work into objects that he makes, and finally we've got the right opportunity here. It's all coming together. See these guys cleaning up the workstations here, opening up a little space around the graphite plate. That tells me we're about to see another big move. Some attachments onto the composition. So getting the space just right. Making sure we've got the right bits of clear glass around, so as soon as they need to add additional attachment material, they've got it ready right where they need it. All right. So I know everybody's going to be curious to see the finished piece, but we're not going to see that today. We're going to see it tomorrow, hopefully. And the beauty of the live stream, we are recording this right now in addition to streaming it. So in about a week and a half to 2 weeks, our video team will have done a little bit of editing, and they'll put the recording of the live stream back up on our YouTube channel, so the Corning Museum of Glass YouTube channel. And at the end of the recording, they'll also add in some still images and some video of the finished piece. So check back in on our YouTube channel in a couple of weeks, and you'll be able to see the live stream again. And again, at the end of that video, you'll see some nice images and video of the finished object. So we don't want to tease you too badly and not let you see that finished piece. All right, getting all settled, getting all organized, getting the communication ready as to exactly how things are positioned and how each of them will be positioned to approach the piece. All right, on go the gloves. Get a few more deep breaths in before things get extra exciting here. We'll get that graphite warmed up. I need to get one of those torches. That is a beast of a hand torch right there. Yeah, we have some folks who make torches just about an hour away from here. The torch that Andrew has in his hand there and also his bench torch are made just about an hour and a half away from here from Glass Torch Technologies. Willie and Wally make some amazing torches for flameworking. All right. Everybody's ready? Here we go. Here comes our composition. We'll get it gently laid down there and start diving in with the torches. So we've got the next one of David's beautiful abstract elements here. Just realigning, reminding themselves, yes, that is exactly where we wanted to place it. And now starting to set up the heat for that attachment. So again, as we're making attachments like this, temperature is crucial, and also the angles at which those attachments are made are crucial. We want to make sure the glass is hot enough that it flows together, makes a permanent attachment, and we want to make sure we have nice smooth attachment points. We don't want sharp angles in there. Sharp angles are weak. All right, so he's already attached at 2 different spots, and he's sort of working the heat back and forth between the 2 spots. He had 2 little bits of clear glass to attach to the frame there. Got to get just a little bit hotter to really get those sealed in there. So getting those 2 spots tacked on there, sort of bouncing back and forth between the 2 spots. camera team here never ceases to amaze me. What gorgeous shots of this work. Great job, guys. All right, so he's got it tacked on in those couple of spots. Now he can remove the punty, the handle, clean that up a little bit. Asking Darby to tilt this again so he can get the torch in at a different angle. Want to make sure we've heated these attachment points all the way around so everything is truly flowed together permanently. We want to get this attachment perfect right now. We don't want to have to go back to it later. As they continue to build this piece, it's going to get harder and harder to get into these different spots that they've already worked on. All right, so again, we've been out of the oven for a couple of minutes, so now Darby wants to get the Bunsen burner sort of washing across everything, keeping the composition nice and warm. Probably the biggest concern are probably the eyes, those peyote button eyes. They're very thick, and also they're attached into the eye socket, so it's a pretty sensitive area there. The thicker the glass is, the more prone it is to get differential in temperature from surface to core. That's when things are more likely to break, is when you get that big differential. A lot of trust involved with collaborating on this level. So just sort of eyeing things out here, making sure we've got a good wash of heat across everything. Getting the attachment refined, making sure it's all nice and clean here. Darby's being pretty gentle with that Bunsen burner. If he gets the burner close enough to the glass, it will actually start to soften it. So he's being very cautious there, looking to see if it glows at all. And if it starts glowing, he wants to back off on the heat. So now Andrew, as he removed the punty, as he removed that clear glass handle, he got most of it off. There's still a little bit of clear glass on the end of there. So he wants to get rid of the rest of the clear and also sort of terminate that shape nicely. So try to get that last little bit finished off and shaped up. Darby's about to get those gloves back on. It's been a few minutes that we've been out of the oven. The attachment's looking nice and clean, so we'll get it back in here, get it cooking again. Let that heat soak back in. Get everything settled. Get it safely back in the oven. Another great move there. Nicely done, guys. Continues to come together. All right, so we'll let the oven come back up to temperature. Let that piece soak some heat in for another 10 or 15 minutes or so. These guys, I'm sure, will continue working on the pipe part, the functional parts. David continuing to crank away his beautiful forms there. He has been working his tail off all along here. A lot of glass making. All right. So sort of discussing the next few moves. These guys are eyeing out some of the different forms, trying to figure out what might be next. not easy to figure out how all the abstract forms fit in with the not so abstract forms and get it to all make sense. So a lot of design discussion each morning when we've been coming back. They sort of work on everything throughout the day. It goes into the oven for the night, so we can't really look at it very thoroughly through the night. So we come back in the morning, the ovens are cold, we pop them open, take a look at everything. They lay out all the different parts, start to figure out what the next moves throughout the day are going to be, which of David's elements are going to work together, where they need to be placed on the composition. So a lot of different sort of design meetings and development meetings as they're going along here. Each morning is an interesting time of sort of evaluation of what's happened the previous day and figuring out what the game plan is for that current day. These guys aren't just winging it here. You don't make this level of work by just sort of sticking glass in the flame without thinking much beforehand. So David's got the next one of the sections that's going to get attached to the composition there. So now that he knows exactly where the attachment points need to be applied, he can get those attached. So just a quick bridging of those two fine points. So those will hold each other in place while I can heat a different area and apply the clear glass that I'll use as the attachment point. I'm guessing Andrew is going to be working on another bone here. Looks about like what that is. Is that right? All right, I'm starting to pick up on your moves. Only took a few days. Yeah, that is important. Yeah, you may notice as glassworkers pick up anything that has a couple of handles on it, whether it's shears or tweezers or whatever it is, there is some instinct inside of us that we all feel we need to click them a couple of times right when we pick them up. I don't know if it's like we don't trust that they're going to work if we don't like squeeze them, but it is just one of those weird idiosyncrasies of us glassworkers. Everybody does it. I don't think I know anybody who doesn't click their hand tools as they pick them up. A nice idea how Andrew creates these beautiful bones here using those diamond shears to sort of nip the tip of that, create a little ball on the end and get it off center so it starts to set up that bone shape. Yep, not bad. You've gotten good at that. Who knew? Yeah. Practice, practice, huh? So carving a little more texture in there. You notice both Darby and Andrew, butter knife is a real key tool for them. As glass makers, we'll use all sorts of different implements and different materials as tools. We'll generally use anything that just doesn't burn too quickly. If it's effective, butter knife is a great sculpting tool. I've used some spoons when I sculpt. If you need a certain curve, a spoon can be really helpful if you have just the right curve on it. You may have noticed our glass blowers and our hot glass demonstrations. They have a bunch of tools that are wooden, even newspaper. They tend to keep the newspaper and a lot of the wooden tools waterlogged so they don't burn too quickly. But yeah, whatever works, we'll go for it. Love how these guys have been incorporating some of the newer colors that have come on the market and finding great ways to really highlight them in this piece. Some beautiful stuff. For those keeping score at home, we've got a bunch of Electrum in here and some Lucy in there. So have some really cool effects. The Electrum gives us that real nice sort of brassy metallic look. The Lucy from North Star Glass is a UV color that when it's in a regular lighting like this, appears to be completely colorless, and then when you shine a black light on it, all of a sudden it lights up with pinks and purples. Very fun stuff to work with. So again, if there are any questions in-house or anything on the internet, you feel free to shout them out or share those questions in the chat. We'll get them answered for you. So Darby's just been preparing this tube of clear glass over here, setting it up just right. This will be attached to the mouthpiece. This is going to be an important handle for the piece as he attaches the mouthpiece. Want to make sure this is structurally sound because he may have the entire weight of the piece on that at certain points. All right, here's that beautiful mouthpiece. That's Royal Jelly is the purple on there. Yep, all right. So we've got some colors from Molten Aura. We've got some North Star colors mixed in there. All sorts of fun stuff. I've learned quite a bit from these guys this week and the way they handle these colored glasses. I was amazed. The Electrum color, it's very expensive, costs $150 per pound. A pound of that color is essentially 10 or 11 of these rods that are about 7 to 8 millimeters in diameter. And you can potentially use up this glass pretty quickly if you're not thinking about how to be most efficient with it. And what these guys have been doing for these different sections that they've got some Electrum in, first they take the rod, they heat it, they melt it into a big ball or a cylinder, and then they'll poke an indentation into that cylinder. They'll take a blow tube like what Darby has in his right hand there. They'll attach it just over the indentation. They'll then heat up that cylinder, get it nice and soft, and inflate it and turn what was a rod into a tube. They make it hollow. From there, once it's hollow and sort of stretched into more of a cylinder, they'll slide a tube of clear glass over the top of that, what we call sleeving. So they sort of sleeve the clear over the color, and they'll add a couple layers, even sometimes 3 layers of clear glass, a couple over the top, even one on the inside, and that will allow them to inflate and stretch the color that much further. This stuff is incredibly dense. I've been amazed at how little of the colored glass they've been able to get away with using and get these incredible effects from it. So for those of you who might be a little gun shy because the colored glass is so expensive, if you're smart about how you use it, if it's a dense enough color, you can really stretch it out. And it really can be fairly economical to work with. And that goes for the Royal Jelly that these guys are using as well, that beautiful purple. That, as they start, is fairly opaque. As you heat it, it'll start to gain a little bit of transparency. But as you add layers of clear over the top to it, it gets more and more transparent, and you're able to make more work from less and less colored glass. So learning to use this stuff efficiently can really save you quite a bit and give you the opportunity to experiment with more of these, the more expensive raw colors. So don't be so shy. Just be smart about how you're using them. All right, so Darby getting this tube attached to the top of the mouthpiece, making sure it's a really strong attachment. Everything's got to be worked in nice and smoothly there. As we attach borosilicate, it needs to be attached very precisely, very cleanly. It requires a lot of heat. Everything, both parts that you're attaching need to be hot enough they really flow together. You can't just tap them together and hope that they stay stuck. And also with a hollow form, like attaching the blow tube onto the end of the mouthpiece, we want to make sure that everything's smooth through the attachment area. We don't want any odd angles in there. Everything's got to be nice and clean and smooth. If there are odd angles, as he tries to torque on that handle, the whole thing could snap and we could lose the whole piece. So making sure everything's attached cleanly and in a structurally sound way is absolutely crucial here. When you get to this level, you don't try to cheat the glass. You take your time, you make sure everything's attached just right. You know, a lot of us, when we're early in our careers, we're excited, we're working on something that is sort of taking us to another level. We might try to cut some shortcuts and things, and it will bite you in the end if you take too many shortcuts. Not worth it. Take your time, make sure your attachments are really worked together properly, make sure your hollow attachments are really worked together properly. Don't risk your work. Take the extra few minutes. All right. Another beautiful electrum bone. And now Darby's opened up the other end of that tube now, getting that shape just right. He's going to want to size up the end of that tube so it's the right diameter for the spot where he's going to attach this onto the can. So the piece is coming together. And again, they've got a long ways to go yet. I imagine we're going to be here pretty well into the evening tonight. And they'll start back up again at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. And I suspect we're going to be here into tomorrow night as well. We'll do whatever's necessary. Still a lot of parts to go here. There is no rushing work like this. You try to rush glass too much, temperatures get out of whack, and next thing you know, things go awry. So we're not rushing any of this. All right. See Andrew's starting to clean up a little bit over here. That means we're getting closer to another big move. And I wasn't saying that to encourage you to clean more. All right. Darby's got that mouthpiece set. We'll get that back in the kiln where it's safe, and he can come back to it in a little bit. So planning out the next couple of moves here. Andrew's talking to David about how they know the next piece they're going to attach as they bring it out now, but they're looking to the next step beyond that as well. So the piece that David's working on there might be the next thing that gets attached in the following big move. So as they finish the attachment of the first section that's going on here, they're also going to take a look at this other section and see how that's going to align. So that'll save them an extra move. Every time they bring the piece out of the oven, it's got to go back in for another 10 to 15 minutes before the next move can happen. So if they can sort of check things out for that subsequent move, it's going to speed things up quite a bit. All right, get all our torches set up here. Gloves on. Everybody ready? All right, so David's got the next piece that's getting attached, getting some kiln dust off of that. Using a very technical piece of equipment to clean that glass off. His t-shirt, that works. All righty, here we go. All right, so get our composition laid out on the graphite, and here we go. Let's get this next piece added in here. Andrew's just getting another handle on there, another punty attached. And we get those connection points softening up. You see those 2 bits of clear glass. Those are specifically on there just to make the attachment so we don't have to overheat the shape itself. That's not going to move. Doing the price check. Checking out exactly where this is going to get landed on there. Making sure Darby agrees. All right. Now we'll get those connection points really cooking. And again, we want to get our temperatures just right for this attachment. We want to make sure those angles are worked in. Okay, here we go. Get this stuck down here. Just going to try to get both of those nubs of clear glass attached and just about the same move here. Brad, that's a heck of a shot right there. You know the camera works good when you just look at the monitors rather than the glass that's right in front of you. So while those connection points are still soft, just sort of making sure everything's aligned the way they want. Darby's saying lift it up just a little bit. So they'll soften the connection points so they can tilt it up a little more. And once they've got it just in the right spot, then they'll finish attaching. You may have noticed Andrew is just sort of pointing his torch in towards the piece, but there wasn't a flame going. Well, he just had the oxygen going, so he could chill the glass very quickly. Get those attachment points to stop moving. Another slick little maneuver there. All right, so now we'll dive in, really get these connections worked in. Everything smoothed in here. So we'll tilt it up so we can get a different angle to get the torch in there. Working from different angles not only allows Andrew different angles to get the flame into that connection point, it also allows him to use gravity to let the glass flow down where it needs to flow to. So we often move the glass around so gravity works in our favor to get that glass moving where we need it. And yeah, we've been out of the oven for a few minutes now, so Darby's got the Bunsen burner just sort of washing over the piece, finding an angle to wash the piece and not wash Andrew with the Bunsen burner. And also not wash himself with the Bunsen burner. And again, probably the most sensitive area of that piece is the eyes and maybe the jaw as well. Getting this all sealed up here. Removing the bridge, getting that clear glass removed, and getting the tips of these forms work just the way he wants. Lots of attention to detail. So here comes David with a couple of the next few pieces that they're planning to attach. We want to do another price check, another check to see that exactly where they want them to be placed. How do they align with the rest of the composition? How do we attach them to the other bits that are already on there? So some other factors that they've been thinking about through the overall process here. They're building this incredible sculpture, and they want to mount it to the wall. So as they're building in all these bits here, they've got to make sure they save some space where the hanging hardware is going to fit in there too. So all sorts of considerations. We've got considerations, of course, of aesthetic and how all the different elements come together. We've got considerations of function as far as how the pipe will work. And we've also got considerations of function as far as how this piece gets hung. You don't want to get too far into it and then realize, oh boy, we didn't leave a spot for the hanging hardware to fit in there. Or we didn't leave a spot to get a drill in to be able to drill the piece into the wall. So a lot of concerns. And these guys wanted to go well beyond the sort of pipe making that is the centerpiece of a lot of their work. They wanted to really push their own boundaries and go for something that would be a beautiful wall piece. Just getting it all cleaned up in there. So just sort of eyeing things out, a little discussion as to how a couple things might move. And Darby trying to figure out how to glove this thing. Not always easy to find a good spot. There we go. We'll get it back into the annealer where it's nice and safe. Another successful move there. Outstanding. So the timing also spot on. We are just about to 4 o'clock where we're going to sign off. So before we do that, how about a nice round of applause. Darby Holm, Andrew Morris, David Colton, incredible work. A big shout out to our sponsor, ABR Imagery. Thank you guys so much for the support. Thank you all for tuning in on the internet. Thank you all for coming into our in-house audience. And hopefully we'll see some folks in-house tomorrow. Keep an eye out on the YouTube channel for the recording of the live stream. In about a week and a half to 2 weeks, you'll see images and video of the finished piece. And thank you all for tuning in. Goodbye from the amphitheater. Thanks. All right, we'll let you guys breathe for a little bit. Sound good? All right. Yeah, so for those of you here, they're going to keep at it. So they're going to keep working till probably well after 5. We'll have to kick you guys out at 5 o'clock when the museum closes. But yeah, there's more to come.